How are you? I hope you're all doing well and that you are safe and ready for our first edition of Drinks and Dress. The recipe for today's cocktail will be posted in the chat box soon for you to see. And I'd like to give a shout out to Anne Wass for developing a mocktail version. And in order to do that, you can simply replace Seedlip Spice 94 for the gin. Thanks, Anne, for your help. So welcome. This is the Costume Society of America's first Drinks and Dress webinar in our series, in the Conversations on Dress. And we'd like to thank you for joining us today. Please remember to mute your microphones and turn off your camera to improve streaming quality. And also, please change your viewing settings from everyone to active camera. I'm going to do that right now. While we are broadcasting live, this content will be recorded and will be available to view through our YouTube channel. And should you have any questions for today's speakers, please submit them in the chat box and reserve the chat box for questions only, please. And should you have any general questions about the CSA digital content, please contact Conversations on Dress at costumesocietyamerica.com. And now I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Leon Wiebers. I am the VP of Grants and Awards for the Costume Society of America and a professor of costume design at Loyola Marymount University. And joining us now is Teresa Greene, who is the curator at the Vermont Historical Society. So welcome, Teresa. And by the way, let's get the cocktail shaken and poured.
Yes.
And a little lemon twist. Cheers. Welcome.
Having mine Vermont style.
Excellent. That's very good. Mine does include Vermont syrup, as they all should. This is quite refreshing. And thanks to Bobby Flay for the recipe, which we lifted from his website. Okay, so we're going to start today's conversation with a little bit of a virtual walkthrough from some things at VHS. Teresa, do you mind if I call it VHS? Is that how you all call it in Vermont?
Yeah, go for it. That's what we call it, yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. So we're going to do a little virtual walkthrough of VHS, and then we'll ask Teresa some questions about her background, and then she'll take us through Storeroom and look at a few other interesting objects that are in the collection but not currently on display. So, Teresa, what do you have to share with us?
I'm going to share my screen with you.
Great.
All right, so as it loads, all right, this is our current temporary exhibit. These are the inaugural gowns of our first and still only female governor, Madelyn. She had them custom designed, pretty much designed them all herself. The first one that she wore was the one that appears kind of red in this picture, but in life is purple. It was inspired by her Scandinavian, ancestry. So it's very peasant inspired. The second one is high 80s, and the other one I like to refer to as Sexy Pilgrim. So
you know who the maker
the exhibit is featuring the dresses. We do. I don't know it off the top of my head though, but I can get that to you afterwards.
Oh, great.
The while the dresses are the featured objects, the interpretive text is all about her and her as a governor and what she did afterwards politically. And I had to include this because the details on this dress are just my favorite.
What do you like about
and moving through the rest of the exhibit? Oh, I'm sorry. There's just
I'm sorry,
exactly a
Teresa.
perfect amount of delay.
Oh, is there? Okay, great. Awesome.
I I love the applique details and the crystals that are added, and the crystals are actually carried through all three of the dresses. On the second one, they're in the bow, and then on the third one, there's a bow on the side hips that incorporates the crystals. And moving through the museum, our museum goes semi-chronologically, and we have costumes throughout, incorporated throughout the exhibit. And as a historical society, we focus mostly on the stories that they tell. So, for example, these yellow shoes that are featured in our shoemaker's shop have a label on the inside with the shoemaker who was based in Vermont. And this is our Civil War gallery, and I'm showing another shoe because this one has a giant hole in the bottom and the remnant of a shell. The man who wore it was shot in the foot. And we, luckily enough, got to keep his shoe and the bullet.
That's amazing.
And finishing, yeah. And finishing out our exhibition space is this Abenaki garment that was donated to us by the wearer. And I love the details on this. It has incredible beading, and just the textures of the textile and the different materials is really fantastic, and we're very honored to be able to have this and display it.
Do you know what period this is from?
This is modern.
Oh. And how was it given to the museum?
So this was donated to us by the wearer. It was worn for a swearing in. I believe he worked for the state government. And then afterwards, he donated it to us directly, which is fantastic.
That's excellent. Nice. Excellent. Are there other images that you want to share from your current exhibition?
Not from the current exhibition. I do have this final slide with my contact info that you can screen grab. It's probably the easiest way to get it. If anybody has later questions that come up about anything in the collection or needs to schedule a visit to see things. Now let me figure out how to end the sharing. Okay.
Excellent. Thank you, Teresa, so much for that virtual walkthrough of your current things on exhibition. So can you tell us a little bit about the Vermont Historical Society and how you came to it and your background?
Yeah, so the Vermont Historical Society started out as an archive. We were the state archive. And so we were really focusing on collecting paper materials. We did collect objects basically from the start, but because that wasn't our focus, we didn't accession them until later. And we are lucky to be able to say that the vast majority of our collection comes directly from either the original owners or their descendants who are close enough descendants to still remember amazing details of the story. So a lot of our stuff has really excellent provenance. And I'm going to be able to share some of that with the objects that I've pulled today. I studied the history of decorative arts with a focus on textiles and costume at the Smithsonian Association in partnership with George Mason. And from there, I bounced around museums in the American South before coming up here to beat the heat.
And now you have all the maple syrup you could ever want.
So much. They gave me some free when I got my house.
Fantastic. So how many objects of dress do you think you have in your collection? Since the VHS has predominantly collected papers and manuscripts and books and things of that nature, how strong of a collection of dress do you have?
Oof. It's hard to say because we're still in cataloging it as we speak. So totally, we have 20,000 objects cataloged of all types, not paper objects. And I'll walk you shortly through our costume storage, and you'll get a visual idea of how many pieces we have. And we mostly have pieces that were manufactured or used in Vermont, but we also have 2 encyclopedic study collections that were made by Vermonters, not necessarily collected for their provenance, but that gives us a great overview of fashion from the beginnings of America to the ends of it, not the ends, oh no, to the nows of America.
To the nows of America. And how do you get many visitors coming to do research in your collection? Specifically in the dress collection?
Not since I have been here. We get a lot of visitors up to the archives, but my schedule is very flexible for anyone who wants to come. As for public visitors, since we've opened from COVID, we average around 16 people per day in the public galleries. So if you are in Vermont and want to come and see the galleries, it's very easy to social distance.
Excellent. Why don't we continue to talk while you take us on a tour of your storeroom and the costume area. So part of the reason I'm assuming that
I'm going to flip my camera around.
A little blurry is because you were below ground in a vault and hoping that things will come through.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I have moved our Wi-Fi router into the room, so if it hopefully will be better.
No worries, you're great. For the viewers who are like wondering why she might be a little fuzzy, you know, the protective environment that these objects need to be in, as we all know, often prevents those sorts of things. So.
Yeah, we are in the basement level and in a cinder block room, so we're doing our best. And if there's anything that I show and the resolution just doesn't come through, I will provide a list of photographs that we can send around.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to flip my camera, hand it over. All right, so our storage things have all been custom built for us. We have hanging storage, box storage, rolled storage, and flat storage. The hanging storage are all in these pods with weighted covers that just go up and down. They're fantastic. I love them. And we have organized things by this side is women's and the other side is men's. And it's primarily through the type of fiber, your wools to get with your cottons and just bring all the bugs in. And as I walk this way, you'll see some of our storage. And the fantastic thing about all of our storage cases is that they're all on wheels, so everything is configurable. If we need to pull something large out of one case, we can move it farther back, give ourselves plenty of room so that everything is handled safely and very efficiently. Okay, so I'm in front of a rolled storage rack, and the rolled racks are 2 deep, and then behind them we have boxes of flat storage with pull-out trays, and that goes to one wall. And then if you can turn around, Andrew, then our other wall is over here, and this is all textile storage. We have our hanging racks with our hanging bins, and then box storage and flat storage. And then along the wall, we have our extensive shoe and t-shirt collections.
Excellent.
I'll go back
Teresa, I have a question for
And
you.
mentioning t-shirt collections to the front.
I have a storage question for you, Teresa.
Yes, sir.
In the arrangement of it, many collections use either compact storage, which moves in its own way. You've said that yours are on wheels. Does that mean that they are free, movable, that they're sort of your own version of compact storage, so that way you can move them wherever you want?
Yes. Yeah, they're all on 360 furniture casters. They were actually built by Seaver Rogstad, who used to be a curator here.
Thank you for
Vermont's
clarifying.
very handy, it turns out. All right, if I haven't lost you, I pulled out several t-shirts because we have a large t-shirt, and I mounted this one because it's the one that we used as our promotional image. It is the Vermontiest thing, a Ben and Jerry's shirt, and says Euphoria on the back. Many of our shirts are political. I've pulled two here, a 2012 Bernie Ford shirt and a Ladies Sewing Circle and Terrorist Society shirt from 1977. Yes. We also have shirts that commemorate local things that happened, schools combined. People were for it and people protested it, and both of them made shirts. And one for Vermont Investment Corporation. And a quick detour to non-costume costume reference materials. These two dolls here came to us via the Merci train after World War II. The nation of France sent train cars, one to every state, as a thank you for train cars of supplies that were sent by America during World War II. Filled up with gifts from French citizens to the United States, and included several dolls that are wearing traditional garments. This one is a lady, and then this one is a chimney sweep. I think he's my favorite because of his little knee pads, and he also is wearing his ladder on his back.
Those are really cute.
And then this next thing is a beaded headdress that was worn by Abenaki Chief Saint Francis, and it dates to about 1950. He said that it was his first headdress, and he gifted it to our donor. Chief Saint Francis was a fascinating fellow. He really pushed against the idea that the only remaining Abenaki were the ones who were in Canada, and tried to push forward the knowledge that so many of them still remained within Vermont, and their especially in Swanton. I don't know how to pronounce it. Every Vermonter is going to hate me. Swanton, Vermont. And I have a few larger pieces that I've pulled out. So this garment I have hung instead of put onto a mannequin because I think that the inside of it is just fascinating and beautiful. This is a howry that was owned by Doctors David and Michio Fukua, who emigrated from Japan to Barre, Vermont. And along with this, we also have their travel trunk and several pieces of ephemera. Michiko, actually, they were both physicians, and Michiko lived through the firebombing of Tokyo, and David provided medical aid to residents of Nagasaki after the atomic bomb dropped. And this next one is a work shirt. This is one of the few ones where we don't have an exact provenance on it. It was purchased by our donor from the estate where it was worn, but the people he purchased it from really wanted to remain anonymous, so we don't know who they were, but we do know that it was worn in Vermont. It's actually a very rough spun wool. It's extremely scratchy, quite thick. It's perfect for Vermont, horrible for anywhere else. It's got turned wooden buttons, though one of the cuff buttons has been replaced. And this has got a red tag because it's one of the ones that I would go for in a fire. This next one, I think, has a great story and great details. It's an overcoat that dates to about 1841. I don't know the exact year that it was made. We know the exact year it was worn because this was worn by Captain John Barrett when he carried the Electoral College votes for Vermont to Washington, D.C. during the election of William Henry Harrison. And it was donated to us by his daughter, so she gave us incredible details about his trip. We know who he stayed with. It was his old friend, Mr. Hall, who was the son of the former pastor of the Grafton Congregationalist Church. The only thing we don't know is if William Henry Harrison was still alive by the time he got back to Vermont. He's the one who died after 1 month of being the president. And then this last piece that I've pulled out for us is a nurse's uniform. It was worn by Leah Elizabeth Chapman Tatro in 1917. And the reason that we can date it so carefully is because she became a nurse. This is her nurse's uniform in 1912, and she got married in 1917. And on the inside lining, written quite large letters, is her name, but it's her married name. So we know that she didn't wear it until after she was married. But the reason that I chose this is because it has detachable sleeves. The upper is a short puffed sleeve, and then the lower attaches with buttons. And this is particularly fascinating for us because we also have a photograph of her wearing this with all of her accoutrements. So it would have really wide starched cuffs and a collar and an apron. And she has fabulous hair in that picture, I just gotta say. And my other favorite thing about this garment is that while the seams are all perfect, none of them are finished. So I just feel a kinship because that's also how I make my clothes.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
All right, are there any details of
Yes, I'd love to see, if you wouldn't mind, could you detach the sleeves so we can see that close up?
Of course.
See the buttons on the outside of the detachable sleeve, or is it sort of like a double placket of some kind?
So the buttons are just attached to the short sleeve, and then they attach onto a band like you would a shirt front. Most of the buttons match, but there are one or two that have been replaced, or vice versa. Maybe all of them are missing and only one or two of them remain.
Oh, that's fantastic. So Teresa, I will ask that you take photos of these things and post them for us, because the video is a little blurry for some, and that way we'll make sure to share them.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's the nature of technology.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's our friend and sometimes it's not.
Yeah, I'll share overall
so if you wouldn't mind,
shots of everything and then detailed shots of everything that we show.
That would be fantastic. Thank you. That's really wonderful. So the buttons actually show on the outside of the longer portion of the sleeve, correct?
So on the longer portion, what we have are buttonholes, and all of the seams are machine done, but the buttonholes are actually hand done.
Very nice. Thank you.
And then the buttons remain on the short sleeve. And the short sleeve also has an internal tie so that you can puff it up. It's also quite starched, so it would have held its shape pretty well.
Thank you so much for giving us this tour. Which is your favorite object that you have in the collection? I assume you pulled it out, so I'm going to ask, which is your favorite object?
So I'm really bad at this question because my favorite object is always the one I've looked at the most recently.
And which is that? The dress?
It's this one.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm gonna open it up a little bit more to show off more of it. So the front of it.
How many t-shirts do you have in your collection?
I couldn't even tell you. I don't know. But I can show you how many boxes we have.
Okay. Not to distract you from undressing that.
Nah, it's good. So all of these are t-shirts. The holes are the boxes for the shirts that I've removed. And yeah, this section here is all t-shirts. And we do have a few that are stored elsewhere, but really only maybe 5.
Right.
There's a pole behind you.
So do you have a separate off-site storage than this, or is this your main storage?
This is our main storage. We are in a different building from our gallery. We're actually in a different town from our gallery. Our gallery is in Montpelier, which is the capital, and we're about 15 minutes away in Barre, which is spelled like bar, the exercise.
Thank you.
So I'm going to open it up just on the top, and you'll be able to see that I padded up her shoulders a little bit because she was quite narrow-waisted, but so it's a little bit too small for a mannequin down here and a little bit too big for a mannequin up here, but it's got an internal vest, the buttons, and interestingly, the buttons used here are not the same as the buttons that are used on the sleeve. And the great thing about a vest like this is that you can fit it tight while still having the loose look of a bodice that's popular during that time. And I'm just going to pull it back enough to where we can see her name written on the inside and the fabulous unfinished seams.
So the unfinished seams.
And my favorite thing about historical unfinished seams is that you can make an argument that they still do last forever if you don't wash your clothes.
So are they pink, or are they just, what do you mean by unfinished?
They're completely raw.
Oh.
Can you show where my hand is? I don't know if it's too fuzzy for this to come through, but it started unraveling a bit, but really not much. And I don't know how much laundering this received because she was a nurse working at the state hospital during the last pandemic. So hopefully it got washed a lot, but it stood up quite well. And there's her name.
Oh, wow, that is right.
And her name really does span the entire bodice, yeah.
So we have a question from one of the viewers. And the question is, does the top of the dress come apart from the skirt?
It does not, but the skirt, so the skirt is attached, but it attaches kind of on the side, so there's a bit of an overlap. The interesting thing about the way that it attaches, though, is that to hide this waistband, the eyes are on the front of the skirt, but the hooks are on the front of the bodice, so the waistband has to be folded down to attach so that it hides and looks more like the seam, the attached seam.
Oh, yes, that makes sense. And does the skirt then close on the side, it looks like?
It does, yeah. And there are no hooks and eyes down here, which could indicate that it was left open for pocket access, but I couldn't say for sure.
Are there pockets?
Just make her comfortable. Not attached pockets.
Oh.
And she would have been wearing an apron that I would hope had pockets, but.
Excellent. Okay. So at this point, thank you very much, Teresa, for the tour, why don't we open this up to the viewers for questions? Are there other questions that you'd like to pose to Teresa about the VHS and the tour and the collection? So let's open up the floor. The first one is the nurse's name embroidered in the back, or is it just written in the back?
It's written with ink.
With ink. Is it in print or cursive or?
It's printed. It's I believe it's in all capital. Oh, it's not in all capital letters, but it is in print. Her last name is capitalized. Chapman is her maiden name.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll send some good pictures of that.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. Another question we have for you is, what is the oldest piece in your collection?
In terms of textiles, well, actually, the previous collections manager is watching, so she could answer for sure in the text, in the chat box. But the oldest ones that I have gotten out and looked at were mid-18th century shoes that were embroidered. They're fantastic. They're wool embroidered, and it's been a little chewed, but they're completely gorgeous.
Excellent. The next question is, so we have a question and a response. Can you hypothesize about why she would want to write the name instead of her uniform? The response has been that we thought it might have gone through the laundry at the hospital with other uniforms.
Yeah. That's why I suspect that she did as well.
Another question we have is, do you
I mean, it doesn't show any laundry wear, so it definitely was professionally laundered.
Oh. The next question we have is, do you have any special collections like farmer's clothing or 4-H sewing examples?
So the work shirt is probably our best example of early workwear. We do have we do a lot of lace samples and a lot of spinning samples of flax that was grown and processed here. A history of it being done by women within the household. Also wool spinning samples and samples of homegrown sericulture. So silkworms that were raised here and then the silk processed. And those tend to be in skeins and in stockings.
Was there a large silk industry in Vermont?
For things that no. And there was an attempt at sericulture throughout the colonies, but it never really took off because the type of mulberry that is native to America is not the type of mulberry that silkworms like to eat. They're really picky. But there was a solid attempt. It was considered women's work, even though it was just super disgusting. But so it was a thing that was tried by women as like a pursuit that was still feminine enough that they could do it without seeming unfeminine. That we have some references to women in Philadelphia doing it, and then of course there is Eliza Lucas Pinckney down in Charleston, who was able to make a lot because she used enslaved labor to do the work for her.
Oh, of course.
May I ask a question?
So the stuff we have in Vermont is quite small.
May I ask a question? I don't know how to get in to write down a question.
Certainly.
Okay. I'm Jackie from Portland, Maine, and on the question of silk in this area, there's a book I edited and co-wrote on silk in early America, which will answer all your questions. There's also an article in Maine History on the silk growing, particularly in Maine, which overlapped into Vermont. So if that's helpful, I'd be happy to give you more information.
Excellent, thank you. Yes.
Awesome, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go back to a few. We have a lot of questions. Let me go back to some of these. Can you tell me who decides what items are worth being part of the VHS collection, and do you turn away very many items?
So the process for accession is I'm usually the one who's contacted first. And if it fits within our mission and isn't incredibly duplicated within our collection or just absolutely destroyed, then I take it to the director, who then is the next level of yes or no. And then quarterly, we present to the collections committee of our board, who votes and makes the ultimate decision. So we accession things quarterly, not as they come in. And we tend to primarily get offered things that are within our mission, which is to preserve and present the history of Vermonters. So it would be things that were made or used in the state of Vermont, which tends to be what we get offered. So we don't turn away a whole lot unless it has nothing to do with Vermont or is already duplicated in the collection. And I would consider something a duplicate if it tells the same story as something else.
Oh, excellent. Does the VHS have any 19th or early 20th century designer holdings or designer holdings in general in the collection?
So we do have the wardrobe of a woman who wore some designer clothing. For example, we have a Pendleton coat from the 1970s, which is superb. But we haven't made an effort to collect designers particularly because in terms of clothing, it's more about who wore it and what stories we can tell through it. So we don't have a kind of separate designer collection.
Excellent. Is there anything that you're really hoping to find in the collection when you complete the inventory like an example of a particular style or time period?
Yes, but so the house that I moved into was built in 1799 and was inhabited not by rich people. And I would love to find something that was very indicative of what they would have worn. So common clothes dating to the end of the 18th century, which, as all of you know, are rare survivors. I would be delighted to find those. And if I found them anywhere, it would likely be here. Our climate is amazing for preserving textiles. Our previous collections managers have done a wonderful job preserving stuff. Everything is in such good condition. So I'm looking forward to being able to find something like that.
We have another question. Who decides what t-shirts you collect, and how do you go about doing that?
So since I've come here, we've accepted every t-shirt that's been presented to us. So we haven't gone out and sought t-shirts. So it's more, I guess the decision process is made more by the public and what they deem worthy of offering us, which can lead to some misrepresentation. Historically, people tend to save the most expensive things. We're gonna get shirts from the people who won history. But we are making, with COVID and the Black Lives Matter movement, effort to collect history as it happens. But at the same time, we don't want to stop history. We don't want to take people's masks off their faces or protest signs out of the protest. We want to have them after they're done. So we may make a change and seek things as opposed to waiting for them to come to us. But up to now, it's been mostly things coming to us. Our most recent t-shirt acquisition is one commemorating the Montpelier flood of the 1990s, which actually flooded our old collection storage and prompted our move to this space.
Wow. And so are you actually seeking collections items to round out your collection at the moment? Or are there objects that you desire to have to help fill out you know, a particular segment or a subset of your collection?
We are. At the moment, it's primarily history as it happens things. So we would love some fabric masks that have a story about being used, particularly by first responders or frontline workers, and clothing that was worn during a protest, not necessarily things that were purchased to give to the Vermont Historical Society. We want things with stories attached. I'm currently going through and inventorying the entire collection to, one, make sure we have what we have, and two, familiarize myself so that I know where our holes are. At the moment, I'm still new enough that I don't quite know where our holes are. But once I do, then we'll be able to go back and fill older holes from long ago history.
And now I have another question. Do you, obviously you have a very good collection of dress, but you mentioned textiles. What sort of textiles do you also have, and how much overlap between the textiles and dress exist in your collection? And I'm not thinking of rugs or wall hangings, but other textile pieces.
Well, I'll walk over here to our rolled storage because, oh gosh.
Careful.
Most of our rolled storage is actually quilts. And with quilts, we do some pieces with a documented provenance of being made from clothing. There are a few where you can actually see like the shape of a sleeve. And some of our quilts were made with samples from local textile mills that were producing clothing textiles. The pieces used for the quilts were more from sales sample books versus cut from clothing. But quilts is a very good overlap. And we have a great sampler collection. I actually have one of our framed samplers. It's a late one. This dates probably to the 1850s. The latest date on it, I believe, is 1857, somewhere in there. It's a family history sampler. This one is a great way to show how our archives and our collections overlap, because our archives are heavily invested in genealogy and are visited by genealogists often. And this is a museum object that has the family's genealogy right on it.
Another question that we have from the audience is, do you have any plain sewing samplers?
We do. We have darning samplers and some alphabet samplers that are really not decorative. They date to the middle of the 19th century. And I believe they're all boxed. Our more decorative ones are out. But yeah, we do. We have map samplers, family history samplers, the traditional ones, and then a lot of small plain ones, and actually a solid amount of unfinished ones.
And then now, given the time of COVID that we are all in virtual realities, have you been invited to many classrooms or organizations to do virtual tours or to show some of your some of the collection off in particular ways? Have any of the local universities or high schools or whatnot reached out to you?
Not to me in particular. If they've reached out to somebody, it's likely our head of education. This is the first virtual tour that I've done in my whole entire life. I have done some virtual study sessions where essentially I act as the person's hands and take high-res images of what they want. But in terms of the collection, it's pretty much been individual researchers. And then some historical societies are in talks for lectures, but not really virtual tours like this.
Oh, fantastic. We have a couple more questions. Back to the samplers, do you have any sampler books?
I believe we do have one, but I might be thinking of one that's been offered that we don't actually have yet.
Okay, we will
But
wait.
that is an answer that I can get to you later.
Awesome. Another question is,
if we do all centers.
Great. Do you have a partnership with other related collections, such as in the States, such as historical societies or other museums?
So part of our mission is actually supporting local historical societies. And we have a set of traveling panel-based exhibitions that can be rented or borrowed by other institutions. And we have a rotating gallery within our museum space that local historical societies can set up their own exhibits there. And we are hoping to eventually get kind of an integrative database so that we can see what they have and they can see what we have, and it can really help us with creating a comprehensive encyclopedic collection in several places of Vermont history. And that will also help as the future goes on and space becomes more of a concern. We can all consider the objects in partner institutions as representative examples that we can lean on, rather than each having a duplicate of a thing.
So I have a personal question, well, not personal to you, but a personal research question. The Costume Society of America has recently begun a Digital Angels program that we've piloted. I've done that with my partner, Monica Sklar. Have you taken on any digitization efforts at VHS for your collections of dress, and what have you done?
So we have started a digitization process for the collection at large, which includes the textiles. We have recently switched databases from Past Perfect to Catalog It, which is a cloud-based system that's primarily photo-based. So as you scroll, you see the photos. So we're retaking our cataloging pictures to not only make them more useful for us, but to get them ready for going on the web. And so the first 3 costumes that got the full treatment were Madelyn Cunan's gowns. So that involves setting up photography here against this wall. Yeah, you can see my lights scattered about. We
Yes.
do have a great space for it, but yeah. But yeah, if your angels want a trip to Vermont, all you have to do is quarantine for 14 days, and then you can come and help us mount some objects.
We will consider that. We have one more question as we're kind of wrapping up this hour program, and this is let's see. When was the VHS founded, and when did they begin doing exhibitions?
You know, those are 2 questions that I can't give you an exact date on. I believe it was the 1870s that we were founded, and I've been going through, I think that's probably the answer that just popped up. I have been going through the files, and the earliest object donation that I have found dates to 1872, I believe, and it was a sword. And then I have found a 1950s reference to rotating costume exhibitions. We had a Victorian lobby set up that the letter said we would rotate costumes through. And then we also had an interpretive space in Calais called the Kent Tavern that would also have costumes rotated through.
Awesome. So Teresa, I'm going to turn this over to you now. Is there anything you'd like to add as we close out this short cocktail program of drinks and dress? Is there anything you'd like to add?
Oof. Oh, that's too wide. I can't do that. I'm very happy to look through any of our costume and textile collection. So if you have any questions at all, please ask, because I love any excuse to get these things out. And as any of you who work in museums probably know, our digitization efforts tend to correspond with what we are getting out at the time, because that makes it easier to photograph. So if you ask me a question about something, it'll get digitized faster.
Excellent, thank you. Teresa, thank you so much for your time today and for taking us through the VHS and showing us some objects virtually and introducing us to your collection so we know what we can start to look for and what we can do. To those of you who've joined us today, first of all, I'd like to say this is being recorded, and there will be a transcript available of the interview with links to publications and the institutions mentioned. And the recorded interview will also include high-resolution images once we get them from Teresa. So I would like to thank Teresa Greene so much for her time and for taking us through the VHS collections and storage and the virtual exhibition that they have up right now. And I hope that you've enjoyed yourself and that you'll come back for this future program and all of the digital webinars that we're offering through CSA. We're currently in conversation with a Native American collection in South Dakota for next month's drinks and dress. So please look to the newsletter for the announcements for what that's going to be. Also, a few plugs for CSA. Please follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and make sure that you are aware of the entire series, The Conversations on Dress. Our first oral history interview is next Wednesday at 7 p.m. with Howard Kurtz, a CSA fellow. And lastly, if you enjoyed this program and if you are a supporter of CSA, please donate. We use this money, it helps keep this free for everyone and free to the public. It also helps us with our education and our mission and our goals in diversification. Thank you all very much for attending, and have a great afternoon, and cheers.